Welcome to Gadgets for Families, the show where you get two grandpas talking about tech. And this week, I'm hoping this topic doesn't make us sound too old fashioned or too out of touch with what's going on in the world today. So we'll see.
Yeah.
You may get a couple of rants from us, but we're going to push through it. So,
Back in my day, we used to have to walk to school uphill both ways.
yep. So hopefully we don't sound like that. But Greg sent me an article a while back, and it just simply said "good read." So it took me a day or two to get to it, but when I finally did, I read it, and it was a very good read. And it was about this increase in um, the remote workforce, so to speak. That's what we'll call it, or uh, what it's properly named is what's known as digital nomads. Now, I know what you're thinking. I work from home all the time, and if I just so happen to work from Chuck E. Cheese that day while my kids are on spring break, that makes me a digital nomad too, right? No, it doesn't. So these are a little bit more complicated than just your average fire up the VPN, I'm not going into the office that day, type of people. These people, they structure their entire lives around working remotely, right? They live and they travel in the places that they want to go to, and still be able to maintain their daily duties from their jobs, and from their 9 to 5s and things like that. So today on G4F, we're going to be talking about the rise of digital nomads and what exactly is it? Why are people doing it? And some of the takeaways and things that we like from the article, and also some things that we may not have liked too much too from the article. So, with that being said, I'm your host, Jay Benjamin.
And I'm your host, Greg Cunningham, and I'm excited about this. We're definitely going to talk about the tech aspect of this because this is
Yep.
enabled by tech, but this is a cultural shift. I think that's happening. So if
Yep.
you've listened to my other podcast, you know that I can get really philosophical
Yeah.
sometimes. So I might get philosophical on this because I really do feel like there's this cultural shift that's happening, but we'll talk about it as we go in. So thanks for joining us today.
Yep. And we're going to finish up with the a rumor roundup of all the latest iPad rumors. Greg and I are both, I'm more excited than he is. He may wait. We'll see. It all
I'm
depends on the
excited. It's
announcement.
just the question of which iPad am I the most excited about?
Right. Because the one that you want may not come till later on this year, but we'll see. So we'll just do a rumor roundup, just to update everyone. I know we talk about this almost weekly, but we'll do that, and also stick around for the post show. We're going to talk about. I guess we're going to go into a deeper dive about the topic today, right? And one interesting takeaway from the article that's not really related to tech at all, and maybe a bit of a rant for me. So spoiler
And,
alert on
and,
that.
and definitely more cultural impact in that post show too. So
I think so too. I think so. So it may not be as techy as we're used to, but it all kind of jives. It all kind of runs together. So stick around for that if you guys are interested. But before we jump in, don't forget to do all the things, right? Do the subscribe, like, and share. And also comment today. Jump in those comments and let us know what you think about today's topics. If you have any experience with it, or share your opinion on how you feel about digital nomadism, or the folks working extreme remote, right? Not just working 15 minutes away from the office, but from a beach in Maui, or somewhere in South America, in Mexico, or something like that. And yeah, share all of that information with us. So we'll be happy to hear it. So let's just jump right back into this thing. And the topic today is about digital nomads, right? And it started with an article by Gianna Eckhart and Alexandria Anton Antonov. Oh, I practiced
I
this
am
name. I
so
didn't want
glad
to
you're
see.
the one trying to say those names and not
I didn't
me.
want to screw her name up, but Antonasova. So the article was for the Harvard Business Review, and we'll include a link in the show notes. I encourage all you guys to check that out. That is a really good article, and it really opens your eyes to, again, not just I'm not going into the office today. I'm just going to fire my VPN, and actually building a lifestyle around digital nomadism. So, um, Greg, let's just start off with what exactly is digital nomadism, if you want
Yeah,
to
so
answer that for us.
yeah, I think that the interesting thing about this article is it was really written from a hey, here's some business opportunities, right? What
Mm-hmm.
can brands or marketing teams or whatever do to support this new digital nomad quote unquote movement? And um, one of the stats that they quoted is that digital nomadism has gone up 131% since
Right.
2019. And you
Right.
look at the pandemic and you go, oh well, yeah, of course, remote work is much, much higher from that. But if you've paid attention to remote work, it's starting to pull back, right? I mean, big
Mm-hmm.
companies are starting to pull people back into the office. And so digital nomadism is not like Jason said, I have equipment that allows me to work from home on occasion. Digital nomadism are people that have jobs or careers, whatever they may be,
Mm-hmm.
and they have, let me put it this way. This is the old grandpas coming out in this. They don't really have physical roots anywhere,
Yep.
right? So these are people that don't have a lease on an apartment. These are people that don't have a home, right? So if you had to give a physical address, which is one of my concerns about this whole concept, if you have to give a physical address for something, they really don't have anything permanent to be able to provide unless they're going to provide like their parents' physical address, or
Yep.
something like that. So but these are folks, they have careers, they're working from wherever it makes sense. And it's a cultural shift that says, I want to travel. I
Mm-hmm.
want to do all of these other things. I don't want to have things. I want to do things. And so I'm going to choose a job or a career or whatever the case may be that's going to allow me to do what I want from wherever I want. And
Right.
there's some big hotspots, right? I think they mentioned Bali and was it Estonia? I can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
But some places I would not have put high on my list of things that countries have started issuing quote unquote digital nomad visas, right?
Right.
That allow you to
Right.
come in and work in the country and do all that kind of stuff. And I remember, I don't know if you remember, I won't mention her name, but we had a young lady that was working for us as an intern.
Mm-hmm.
And then we hired her. And then her significant other got a job in Germany. And she's like, I want to
Right.
go. And I was like, cool by me. I'll go have fun. And
Right.
HR went, "Meh, meh, meh," right? I mean, major thumbs down on the whole process. But I
Yep.
think today that might be different because of this digital nomad. So again, this is not
Yeah.
just work from home. These are people whose lives are built around traveling and being somewhere else and still doing their jobs.
Right. Right. And you mentioned things like, the digital nomad visa from certain countries and stuff like that. Um, yeah, this is more than just getting an Airbnb at a vacation spot,
Hmm.
right? And saying I'm just going to extend my vacation for, another 2 weeks or whatever, so I can stay here in Costa Maya, Mexico, and still be able to work. This is basically,
Yeah.
24-hour a day vacation, and then you just work your 8 hours and stuff, and it involves things like, of course, passports, right? If you're staying in any country,
Yeah.
you need a passport, but making sure that you're up on that country's laws and getting a visa and the documentation and stuff that you need to be able to work and things like that. So yeah, it's a little bit more involved than just firing up the VPN. So I'm going to start, just with this conversation, we're going to keep it simple, right? I'm going to ask three questions, and then we'll answer those three questions and try to talk this thing through. So, question one, I'm going to start with is, why do you feel that there was an increase, right? Like you mentioned, 131% increase since 2019. Um, I think COVID started a lot of that, but I think that, like you said, some of those numbers are coming back, right? Companies are calling people back into the office. 2020, 2021, it was more out of necessity that we had this huge increase in the remote workforce. But I think a lot of companies noticed that it didn't affect productivity, right? Their numbers didn't go down. People were actually working or working better or working harder from these uh from being remote and not being in the office. But I think for people, I think it gave them a sense of freedom, right?
Yeah.
Whether that be a false sense of freedom or not, I don't, that's something that we can debate, and include that in the comments if you have an opinion about this. But I think it gave people a sense of freedom. They can work and, like you said, not have any roots. They don't own a car. They don't own their home. They don't have to pay those utilities, right? I saw a documentary. um, I'll get into that later, what the documentary was really focused on, but there was these people, um, then they work for your Exxon Mobil's and your huge companies, your huge tech companies, and they're buying up all of the property in Mexico and things like that. But for these folks, they don't have to pay those utilities or whatever, because a lot of them were living in Airbnbs and hotels and things like that. And all the extra costs involved in owning a home and things like that. But they're basically free from all of that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, oh, what I was saying that my other point was, isn't that just a symptom of the way, society is now, right? They don't want to own the whole album because they can just stream the two songs they like from the album on Spotify, right? Why buy the whole album? Why buy a stove and a microwave in your little apartment? Uber Eats can literally bring you breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day, so you don't even have to learn how to cook. You can eat all of your favorite food all day, every day, and someone can just bring it to you. So, and they used to say, home is where the heart is. Now, home is wherever the high speed internet and the Airbnb is, right?
Yeah.
So, I think it's that sense of freedom that people want. That's what's driving this increase in digital nomadism. I don't know. What do you think, Greg? What do you think is driving this increase?
I told you we run the risk of me getting philosophical in this, right? So,
No, let's get into it.
for those that don't know, I mean, the other part of my business is consulting, digital transformation consulting. And when
Yep.
I think about that, several years ago, I wrote an article I think it's still floating around out on LinkedIn about um, Netflix and Blockbuster. So there's the
Right.
grandpa, Blockbuster.
Right.
But in order for a transformation to take place, it's got to be a convergence of three things. You've got to have the culture's got to be ready for it,
Mm-hmm.
the technology needs to be ready for it, and the laws and the legislation and all of those kinds of things need to be ready for it as well. Okay,
Right.
so technology's probably been ready for this for the most part for a decade or so. I mean, as soon as you introduce high speed internet, and unlike the rest of the world, the U.S. really lags behind in high speed internet. I mean, you go to most other
Which is
countries,
crazy. Yeah.
semi developed even, and you're going to get much better internet than you are here in the US, especially when you live in rural. I'm lucky. I don't know how I ended up with gig fiber for as cheap as I get it
Right.
here. It's just crazy to think of the town that I live in that that's what I have, but I
Yeah.
do. Also shows that it's a company that bought out Comcast in this area. Comcast wouldn't have done it, I don't think. So they
Yeah.
bought out Comcast, and you've got a small town company benefiting a bunch of small towns. Anyway, that's probably a whole other conversation. So
Yeah.
we're going to answer the question about technology and when a little later in the show, because you've got a question about that.
Mm-hmm.
Laws and legislation wise, there's still a ways to go. Um, so I can talk about a few of those things later on. But the cultural thing is what I think you were talking about. So pandemic hits and everybody has to stay home. You can't
Yep.
do anything. You've got to stay home. But then as that first 6 months or so of the pandemic, as we realized it was going to be longer term and we were able to open up some things, companies realized that I've got to do something about this if I want to stay in business. I can't
Mm-hmm.
just tie my business to commercial real estate anymore. And so they started to open this up, and you had this, I won't call it a mass exodus, but you had a huge exodus of people from the Bay Area or some of these
Yep.
other high rent, high property value places, and that all of a sudden said, hey, I can go live out in the country somewhere, which is much more my lifestyle, but I can continue to do my high tech job that pays me very,
Yep.
very well.
Yep.
Right. And
And that they
so,
love doing. They love
Correct,
doing it,
correct.
not just for the pay. If you love
Absolutely.
doing your job, you can keep
Yep.
doing it. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I used to think about so when I look at potential church missions, like if Karen and I wanted to serve a mission right now, they've got
Hmm.
missions for senior couples. I know I'm not that old, although we're getting up to one of those big milestone birthdays. But um, when I look at that, when I look at how much a mission would cost me here in the States or like Hong Kong, which is one of the most
Hmm.
expensives, or London, and then I look at something like South America and I look at
Right.
just the sheer cost differential, right? And so
Hmm.
if I were going to go to somewhere in South America, but I still make my San Francisco Bay Area salary, or even if they adjusted my salary down, which a lot of companies
Right.
started to do, they had salary
Right.
tiers based on where you live. But even if they adjusted it down, I'm still going to live
Right.
pretty darn well,
Right.
right? So I think people started to see that. And then I think that other thing that you talked about where people are um, not wanting to own things. I
Yeah.
don't want to buy something. Uh I don't need to own my video game. I don't need to own my music. I'll just stream it cuz it'll be
Just
there
streaming. Yes.
forever. And there are some potential downsides for some of that kind of stuff which we can talk about. But I think that happened. And then the last thing that I think happened is that, and this started before the pandemic, but with inflation the way it's been running and the cost of the housing market, all of those things have combined that this younger generation, like you and I already own homes, so we know
Yes.
what that's like. Once you own a home, it's easier to get the second home,
Yes.
right? Because you're going to build up equity, hopefully, in your first home, and then you can turn that into the second home. But if I look at, Dustin at one point said, I'm never going to be able to afford a home,
Yep.
right? And
The
that's getting
salaries hadn't
worse.
changed that much.
Yeah.
The property values went up, but not the salaries.
Yeah. And so just that sheer cost of the American dream, I think people have started to look at that and gone, oh, that's not even
Yeah.
a dream for me. I'll never be able to make that a reality. And
Right.
so, even if whether that's true or not is the debate, right? But when you have that kind of a shift and you say, I can't have the dream that my parents had, right? Then you
Right.
start saying, okay, well, what else is there? And so that's where I think a lot of people started to look and say, oh, well, now that I think about it, maybe I don't want that dream that my parents had. Maybe
Yeah.
I want a different thing. And so that's the cultural aspect of all of this, where I think there's this cultural shift happening where people are finally starting to say, I don't want what my parents wanted.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily wrong, right? Sorry, that was a really
Mhm.
long philosophical
No, no, no. That's what I
monologue there.
wanted to get into. And part of my disclaimer too from the start was I didn't want to sound like two old men ranting. Because it's okay to not want the things that we want, right?
Hmm?
Not wanting that quote unquote American dream that we've been chasing. You know, their American dream is a little bit different than ours. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we're not saying that there's anything wrong with not one of the things that we wanted or our parents wanted or things that our great grandparents worked for to build our family. Um, and this is part of my rant from later. It's just we have yet to adjust to this
Yes.
younger generation not wanting to build on that and maybe they'll be able to do it a different way. We just hadn't seen it yet. So again, that's my
Yeah.
spoiler for for the
For
post show.
later.
But
Well,
yeah, yeah,
the
I
cultural
think that is
shift
a
is
good
not
point.
done, right? I mean,
Right, yeah, it's still shifting.
think about how long it took Blockbuster to go out of business,
Yeah.
right? And for people to make the shift from I go down to the store, I rent a VHS or a beta back
Right.
in the day just to make us feel even older. But I go down and rent something. But there was this very, very long transition. I mean, Netflix only shuttered its digital DVD delivery service like last
Right.
year
Yeah, yeah, it
or
was
maybe the year
early last
before.
year. Yeah.
So this cultural shift, and it may require the younger generations that want this different lifestyle to get into positions of power, meaning political office or running businesses or all of those kinds of things in order to complete this transition, because you are going to
Yeah.
have people. And I take a little bit of exception. I know why you're saying it. You don't want us to sound like old fogies, but I don't think either of us think that way. And we're going to talk about this in question number 2,
Yeah.
right? But I think it may take some more of that transition of that generation getting into a position where they can influence the broader culture, the broader legislation. Again, the technology, not so much, because I think it's ready for this
Right.
transition, but there's part of the culture that's ready for it, part of it that's not. There's not a whole lot of legislation and infrastructure and all of that kind of stuff that's ready for this. And
Yeah.
in order to complete that cultural transition, it may just require this quote unquote younger generation getting into a position where they can influence it.
Right. Right. So let's move on then to question number 2. And that's, could you see yourself as a digital nomad, and how would you apply these things to your life, right? Your current lifestyle. So I'll start off on this one, just like the last one. But Greg, I like to cruise,
I
right?
was just going to say, you better talk about cruising when you go into this.
So my wife and I, we love the cruise, and even even the kids, they love the cruise too. And man, people always, well, I don't want to get into that, but people always ask, how do y'all go on so many cruises? Your credit cards must be maxed out and things like that. And I'm like, we worked that into our life. So I say that to bring this up. Pop Life was started because of our love of cruising, right? And I'll explain. I worked full time with Halliburton. My wife, she was a stay at home mom, but the salary was, good enough for us to be able to live and support ourselves. But it didn't really, at the time, leave us, much income for cruising and stuff like
You
that.
weren't
We could
going
pay
on
for our family.
cruises very
Right,
often.
right. We could
Definitely
pay for
not
our
twice a
family
year.
vacation once a year or something like that, or a quick little trip down to San Antonio or something. But say, okay, well, what can we do to not stress ourselves, our bills, and our income from my 9 to 5? Um, so we started the popcorn company, and that gave us a little extra income and things like that. And remember, it was just extreme part time. It was just, we'll book a cruise, we'll pay it off, we'll have extra money for the ship and stuff like that. And every time we would have a market or something, people would be like, "This is the best popcorn I've ever tasted. We know we love this. Where can we find more? Where can we find more?" And we said, "Okay, well maybe we have something with this." And then 2020 happened, and I was laid off and forced to invest in myself, and invest in us. And again, that's a different conversation. But the point is, we structured our lives around being able to have the ability to cruise when we want, right? I didn't want to have to submit for vacation time. I wanted to be able to say, this cruise is cheap. This cruise is during our birthday month, which is September. It covers my sons, both of my sons, my dad, and my birthday, all in September. So we always take a trip in September. It can cover all of that, and it doesn't break the bank, right? We'll have a separate source of income to support our cruising habit. So now that's digital nomadism is not really the same thing, but I can see myself, if I was physically able, or if the company would be able to, if I had the means to be able to work from a cruise ship, I would. Let me
Yeah.
put it like that. Because we structured our lives, we built the company to allow us to be able to have our cruising time and stuff like that. So I can see someone wanting to say, "Hey, I want to live in Bali. I want to live in London, still be able to work my job, and still be able to be
Yeah.
live the life that I want to live."
It,
So,
you're talking about, and we'll get into this more later, but you're talking about a shift from I choose a job and a career
hmm
so that I can have a life
right.
to I'm choosing a job or a career that enables the lifestyle that I want. So it's a lifestyle
Yes.
career. And that's a whole
Yes.
philosophical conversation
Right.
I'll get
Right.
into a little bit, and we'll probably talk about it a little more in the post show. But you may not be a digital nomad because you're not working for a corporation. You're not
Right.
able to work from wherever, whenever you want, which is kind of the whole thing about digital nomads. But even more
Hmm.
important, your choice is more important, I think, than choosing to be a digital nomad, which is I know the life that I want.
Right.
I'm going to choose a path that allows me to do that. And that is not your parents' goal. That is
No,
not what your parents
no.
did, your grandparents. That is definitely not what anybody in my family has ever done.
Right.
It's always I choose the job and then I figure out what I can do
Yes.
based on the job, how much money I make. Okay, well, I've got a goal to make more money so that I can do more things. Instead of flipping this around and saying, like you have done, which is, I want to cruise twice a year
Yep.
and I
Or
want to pay
more
my
if I
bills,
could.
right? I
Right.
want to cruise at
Right.
least twice a year and I want to pay my bills. So what do I have to do? And I got thinking, the question really for you is the day your daughter graduates from high school, right?
Right.
Are you and Wendy going to spend a whole year on a cruise ship,
Right. And
right?
we could.
And
We could. So, and you're right. So it's not necessarily digital nomadism, but the choice is the same. And I that's what I'm saying. I can see how I can apply those things to my life because technically I made the same choice. I made the choice of shifting from find a job and then, like you said, do what I can do within my means of that job. I shifted from that to saying, this is the life that I want to live. Let me build my career and my environment and stuff around that. So,
right,
uh, you know, I'm the boss, like you asked me earlier. Aren't you the boss? I still don't take as many vacation days as I want, or off days, or
or
time.
days off period.
But let's get into that though. So you said that it is more of a shift in your whole thinking and stuff like that. So what do you think? How could you apply this to your life and things like that?
Yeah, and just make sure you cut me off because I have spent my entire Jason knows how driven I am. So
Right,
Jason has seen me in a corporate environment and I can get things done. I can hang with the best of them,
right,
right? I can do all the traveling, I can go overseas, I can evaluate vendors, I can sit down in an executive room and do presentations and all that kind of stuff.
right.
But
Let me stop you before. I often say, like when we talk about like your clients and stuff like that, like, oh, they thought they were getting a regular contractor, a regular client, not Greg Bot 2000, right? Greg is the data. He's an android of what I mean, consulting and stuff like that. But go ahead, go ahead. I didn't mean to. Hopefully, I throw you off your point.
no, no, no. And that sounds kind of like bragging, but I spent a whole career,
Yep.
right, doing that. And I had an amazing mentor when I first started that had been an executive with IBM and just so happened to be working at the bank and brought me on and saw something. I don't know who in their right mind gave me the kind of responsibilities that she gave me. So I spent 20 plus years chasing that dream. And we've owned, houses in every city we've lived in, basically.
Hmm.
And that's the American dream and all that kind of stuff. And then this last time I got laid off, it just made me stop and go, I don't want that anymore.
Yep.
I just don't. It isn't that I don't want the American dream, but what I decided I didn't want is to chase the money or
Hmm.
chase the life. I wanted to live the life and let whatever I was doing support the life that I wanted to live. And so, right, wrong, or whatever, I have spent since September of 2022 doing my own thing. Right.
Right.
So I've got my consulting business, did the Leaders Lift podcast for a while, didn't quite do what I wanted it to do. We're doing this podcast. I'm paying my bills. Right. I mean, do
Hmm.
I have as much money as I had when I was working for a Silicon Valley tech company? Absolutely not. Right. Um,
Right.
do I have all the stressors that I had then? No. Do I have a whole other set of stressors? Yes. Right.
Right.
But
The
I just
uncertainty and
decided
things
that,
like that. Yeah.
yeah, I wanted to live a different style life. Now, last year it probably wouldn't have mattered anyway with both my parents passing away. I was talking to someone yesterday and I'm like, I don't know how I got anything done last year, to be honest.
Yep.
Right. I mean, it just was just one thing after another after another. But
Right.
what that's led me to is I'm transitioning. I've made the decision to transition, and Jason's sitting there in his head going, it's about time.
Right.
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 So we are in the process of transitioning to a lifestyle career. So I couldn't keep doing things exactly the way I've done them for the last year, not over the longer term. There's a difference between being able to pay your bills versus being able to pay your bills and still start funding retirement, right? And
Yeah.
thinking about some of those kind of longer term things. In fact, I had somebody ask me yesterday, with this transition I want to make, have you thought about how many years you're actually going to be able to do this new thing, because it's more physical and more
Yeah.
hands-on. It's not just sitting at a computer, which I could probably do until, who knows, till my brain doesn't work anymore.
Hmm.
But um so I want to make this transition, and um I've been able to think about that and been able to start thinking about that. And so I'm not going to be a digital nomad, but the next step in my career is going to enable the lifestyle that my wife and I have decided we want to have.
Right.
It'll enable a lifestyle that will allow us to support the kids. It does not involve where's the next home I'm going to
Yep.
purchase, right? It
Chasing
does
that.
not
Yep. Chasing that
involve,
next city and that next high
yeah,
paying
what's the,
position. And
yep,
yeah.
exactly. None of that stuff is even part of this. So do I have all the answers right now? No, absolutely not. But that's why it's a journey. In fact,
Yeah.
couldn't fall asleep last night, and I had to send myself a note that says, stop trying to think 15 steps ahead. Right? Just think about the next 1 or 2 steps. You know what your end destination, your end goal is, but don't
Yes.
try and fill in all the steps in between right now. Just fill in the next couple of steps. So,
Right.
digital nomad, no, because I don't know that I want to work for, a tech company or somebody else that's going to let me work from anywhere in the world. Um, Lifestyle career, absolutely. That's my next
Yeah.
step.
Yep. Yep. So I know I mentioned this before, but when you and my direct manager would be tasked with going through the interview process, right? You used to have like a panel, or we would team up to do something. And one of the questions we would always ask, and there's no wrong answers to this question, right? It's just to see this person's mindset. Was life about the journey or the destination? Remember that?
Mhm.
Remember that question? And a lot of people gave a lot of different answers, and I would always answer that question for me. Uh, it's always about the journey, right? Because you have that destination in sight, but throughout the journey, sometimes that destination changes,
Yeah.
right? You may start off saying, I want to get to that point. I want to get to point B or point Z. And as you're going through all of the different steps, you say, well, maybe I don't want to be at Z anymore. Maybe I want to be at Y. So it's about enjoying that journey to get to the destination. Stop um, and again, this is just my perspective. I'm not saying you should be the same way, but you know, so many people work their lives away, trying to get to a certain destination and not enjoying the journey. So we
Yeah.
definitely need to make time to enjoy that. So,
Well, and I wasn't like that. I was at
right,
one point I wanted to be a CEO, right? I thought I'm
right,
going to run the bank, back when I was there. And I think there was even some of that when I was at Stewart, right? Which is, how do
right,
I get up into those? Because I was working with those executives and I got along great with them. And
yeah,
if my kids listen to this episode, the thing that I want them to get out of this is that dream,
hmm,
dream big. Don't be afraid to change your dreams.
right,
But most importantly, live life, right? That, make it be about the journey. Yes, the destination is fine. The destination, like you said, can change. Dreams change, but the
right,
journey you're going through right now is what it is,
right,
right? And
right,
you need to take advantage of that. And like a couple weeks ago, we're sitting at dinner, and everybody's super, super sick because I live in a petri dish. And my
right.
granddaughter, we're sitting at the dinner table, and she's like, Mom, why can't you go with me to bake bread tomorrow? They were doing a bread baking experiment in her preschool. And my daughter's like, I'm sick, honey. I can't go. I can't go and get the other kid sick.
Right.
And she's like, okay, mom. And you could just see the down, right?
Right.
How that was. And so, I get up the next morning and they go off to school. And about an hour before the bread baking thing was, I just realized, what am I doing?
Yeah.
I don't have anything on my plate for my client for the next 2 or 3 hours. It wasn't podcast day. Actually, I think it might have been podcast day, but you were gone. Um,
Hmm.
but anyway, so I'm texting my wife and saying, what time is it at?
Yeah.
And
I'm gonna go bake bread.
yeah, I just show up and she's like, Papa, and she does her so excited, right? And we made bread and she was thrilled and all that kind of stuff. That is such a difference between when my youngest daughter was born, 2 days into my week of paternity leave, because that's all we got back then.
Yeah.
2 weeks or 2 days in, my wife's like, you just might as well go back to work. Because I was getting so many
Right.
phone calls and working on so many things from home that she's like, just go
Yep.
back to work. Right. And that's just not good. So that's who I was. That is not who I want to be now. I won't say that I'm perfect at all of this.
Yeah.
Right. But that, I think, is the difference between the old school dream, which is I got to do whatever it takes to keep the job happy.
Yeah.
Right. Versus the new school thing is I got to do whatever it takes to focus on the things that are most important. So again, if my
Right.
kids are listening, one, I'm sorry that I wasn't nearly as attentive as a parent as I probably should have been when you were growing up. But two, because they're all still planning their lives and their careers, right? None of them are
Right.
to that point of no return or that point where it's very difficult to course correct. Yes, think about your destination. Don't be afraid to change the destination,
Right.
but
Hey.
journey. Go through
Yeah.
the journey.
Yeah. So much stuff so many things to include on that, man. You're absolutely right. And don't feel like you're a failure if you have to change that destination, right? Don't
Right.
feel disappointed in yourself. But you know, we're tech grandpas, right? We can go in on this. Like I'm thinking about your granddaughter. She's gonna remember that for the rest of her life. You know what I mean? She's gonna be an old lady on a sick bed one day, and she's gonna remember her grandpa coming
Yeah.
to bake bread with her. And that's the thing in life that we love. That's what we work for. And we think about again that quote unquote American dream that we've been chasing all these years. The man, the father, the grandpa, we were always the ones that have to work to provide this lifestyle for the family, right? And the
Yeah.
mom and the children get to enjoy the lifestyle, and the grandchildren get to enjoy the lifestyle that we built, but we were always at work.
Yeah.
I think
Yep.
about you know, let's move on because we can we can
Let
make
me
this
just
show
drop we
an
can
hour and a half.
I just want to share one more thing. One of the
Yeah.
full-time RV families that I follow, you're going to
Hmm.
love the title of their channel because I think this bleeds into this, and then we definitely should get into the tech. But I think it goes right back to what you were talking about and what we're going to hit on in the post show. The name of their channel is Less Junk, More Journey.
Wow.
They sold everything. They have been full-time RVing for 5 or 7 years now. And they had one kid when they started. They now have two.
Right.
And she was a travel nurse. So that's kind of what got them into it.
Okay.
Also, a thing, didn't realize how big of a deal it was for medical professionals to sign a contract somewhere for 3 months and then
Right.
move on to the next contract somewhere else.
Yeah.
Again,
Until COVID, I
lifestyle
didn't know there
choice,
was a
right?
yeah.
And
I didn't
make
know there were traveling nurses until COVID.
good
Yeah.
money, but get to experience somewhere for 3 months and then move on. So, but
Right.
that's their philosophy, right? Is we don't need to own junk. They still have a home base, which I think is part of this cultural legislative shift that still needs to happen. They still
Hmm.
have a home base that they can go back to, but less junk, more journey. And I think if all of us focused a little more on the journey and just enjoying that journey, because there's a ton of crap in life, but man, there is plenty of really good moments
Right.
in your journey if you'll take advantage of them. So,
Yeah.
all right,
Yeah.
we better get on,
I was.
Jason.
Yeah, yeah. Let's move on. So this is a tech show, right, Greg? So
Well, yeah, sort of, kind of.
today is a tech show. Let's bring it back to tech. So my last question is, what is some of the technology that drives being able to do this? Because, like you said, the infrastructure has been there for maybe the last 10 years or so, but that hasn't always been the case, right? We talked about VR and how VR has been around from the 60s, right? VR and AR. It's just that the technology that's available to us now has allowed things like the Vision Pro and the X-Real glasses and things like that. As technology gets chips get faster and faster and things get smaller and smaller, right? The same with being a digital nomad. The technology hasn't always been there, right? We remember back in the 80s and 90s, right? They had the big cell phone or whatever. And,
Yeah.
you were the CEO of the company, you can afford the technology that allow you to be able to work remotely. But what was that? That was a car phone, right? You had the little bag, and I have my dad's car phone, by the way. It's a little
Nice.
bag that you carry with the phone, and you pull it out, and it had the big antenna that you had to turn and expand up like that. That was mobile technology at its finest back in the 80s. And things got smaller and smaller, faster and faster. So let's just talk about some of the technology that's driving this, that's allowing this. And let's be honest, I'll start this thing off. The backbone for any mobile workforce is high speed and stable internet connections, right?
Stay
Because there's,
keyword there,
yeah,
right?
stable being a key word because, there's YouTubers that'll turn out a YouTube video on a cruise ship, right? There's people who can work if you're just updating spreadsheets or something like that. But I don't believe the technology on a cruise ship would allow you to do some really intense uh, photo and video editing and things like that, where you're having to upload terabytes of data and stuff like that. The technology is just not there. So we're talking,
Or if all your tools are in the cloud, right? I mean,
right,
that's probably one of the big parts about this internet stuff is, am I working on the internet or am I just
right,
using the internet to transmit
right,
data? Because there
right,
is a big difference. I mean, think about Thanksgiving, how hard it was for me to publish our show that week.
right.
And I had decent cell phone and hotspot signal, but it took hours upon hours for our show to upload.
Yeah, you had to go on a little journey, on a little trek, just to while everything was updating.
Yeah.
So you're right, and that brings me to the next thing was the cloud services, right? Uh, um, Software as a service, even entire infrastructures as a service, right? So it depends on how much of the heavy lifting is being done on locally on your personal machine, whether that be a tablet, computer, things like that, software that you have to install. Let's get into that too. Being able to work online, right? These cloud services and
Yeah.
online services, right? Software as a service, infrastructure as a service, things like that. Um, it all depends on how much heavy lifting your equipment is doing, your local equipment, your laptop. If you're having to install, you know, huge software that has to connect back to the company and is transmitting data and huge data files and things like that. Um, the high speed connection, one, it will allow that, but also being able to offload some of that heavy lifting from the computer to the cloud, to the website, to the things like that. And all you're doing is accessing that data
Yeah.
from an internet browser or a lightly built, app or something that's really a web-based app. It's just,
That was
running
my
on your
life at
machine.
Stewart at the end, right? I mean, I had
Yeah.
that giant iPad Pro and I had a virtual Windows environment that sat
Yeah.
in the server room that was heavier lifting than I would ever need for anything,
Yeah.
but I always needed an internet connection, stable and solid, if I needed to get into that environment. So if I was out camping or whatever, I'm limited to what I can do on my local machine without an internet connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
that
that
was
technology has
definitely it.
definitely advanced because there was back in the day there weren't unlimited data plans, right? You had
Yeah.
a set amount of data and so you were doing all your work and then you were turning on the data connection and waiting for an hour for the 3 megabytes of stuff to upload, but that was half
Yeah.
your data, so then you were turning it back off immediately in order to not use up any more of your data because it was
Yeah.
ridiculously expensive if you went over those caps and stuff. And so stable, high-speed internet, these cloud services, but then we can't discount unlimited data, right? Unlimited
Right.
bits, and that being cost effective enough for the quote unquote general population to be able to take advantage of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So security is another thing that'll allow that's allowing this, right? And we're talking beyond VPNs, right? A VPN is a virtual private network. It basically takes your current internet connection and puts it somewhere else, right? So let's say uh, your company was in San Francisco. I'm here in Houston. I fire up a VPN. It treats my internet connection as if it was in the building in San Francisco or headquarters or wherever that may be. So, but beyond all that, they have tools like single sign-on, secure passkeys that you install on the device, multi-factor authentication, which is something we talked about before that annoys the heck out of people, but it helps companies be more secure. It helps them prove that you are the person that you are, right?
I know you're working in Europe right now, but all of a sudden you're trying to log in from Russia.
Right.
Um,
That's not you. We know that's
that's
not
not
you.
me. Please block that, right?
Yeah, yeah. So all these things, and it helps appease the company's security guidelines or requirements and things like that because you know some of these higher level positions, they deal with some really secure and really valuable data to these companies, right? You think
Yeah,
about a Google executive that's, not at the headquarters, that's working from Atlanta or something like that. He still deals with a lot of sensitive information and being able to transmit that information back and forth. Some of these security options it helps facilitate being able to work remotely, right?
yeah,
Otherwise, nothing to be secure if you're transmitting it over the internet. That and Google may not have been the best example of that, but you know, a security company, government agencies, and things like that, where they have everything locked down to the point where you can't even hook a different monitor to your tower, right? It needs
right.
to be your monitor, or it's not going to work at all. So,
Yeah. And this isn't just about digital nomads, but this is also about business in general. I mean,
right.
Google, Apple, Microsoft, none of these companies would be able to have offices worldwide and have staff worldwide, let alone digital nomads,
Yeah.
without these technologies. Because you can't physically drop a line from Seattle to, uh, you know, London that's dedicated to Microsoft. They
Right.
can't actually put that piece of hardware in place. And so it's got to go through the broader infrastructure. So, that's where it started, right? Was we built up this infrastructure and the internet and all this kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden people are realizing, oh, it's not just business application. Now it has personal application. And
Hmm.
that's this cultural shift that I think is happening. This generation that has grown up with all of this technology is going, why are you putting limits on me? Why are you
Yeah.
trying to chain me down? I see what all of this stuff can do. I know what it is. Don't hold me back. Stop thinking in your little box and realize just what this technology could do. Because, I mean, you've done security work, you've done this, you've done networking and all that kind of stuff. The
Hmm.
old school was, well, that facilitates our intra office communication only. And there's one connection out to the outside world, and that's it. But the younger generation, even younger generation of security professionals, is going, it doesn't have to be that.
So some of the other technology too that's driving this, of course, is battery life, right? And some of these devices, we see Apple and Google and LG and some of the other companies, they always stand on the stage and they always say all day battery life or work day battery life or something like that. And if these devices can't get us away from these chargers, right? Because we talked about being tethered to a desk or tethered to a monitor or something like that. Also, too, if you're tethered to a charger, that's keeping you wired to the wall. You're connected to the wall. So the battery life, which I'm always ranting about, has not kept up with technology. It's at least improved enough or where companies like Apple, who design their hardware and software to work so efficiently together that it improves battery life on its own, it has improved some. And it's allowed us to break away from that tether that's the charger. right? So laptops, tablets, phones have gotten to the point where they can at least get us through an 8-hour workday without having to charge.
Or you've got things like solar batteries, or you've got portable
Yes,
batteries, and all of that kind of
portable
stuff has
power.
come along
Yes,
so
yes.
far. And it isn't just part of the problem is our devices do so much more right now, right? I
Yes.
mean, if I took my first flip phone that I owned, right, and it had my iPhone 15 Pro Max battery,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have to charge that thing ever,
Ever. Yeah. Yeah.
right? I
A
mean,
year,
so
once a
there is
year.
some of that. There is part of that, but yeah, I mean, this is about, can I do what I want to do, right? Can I do the work that I want to do in the way I want to do it with the tools I want to use? That used to
Hmm.
just be, do I want a Mac or do I want a PC? But it's not
Right.
that anymore. It's way broader than that. And can I do it where I want?
Right.
Can I do it from on top of a mountain because I want to go on this amazing bike ride that starts at 6 a.m., but I know I have a conference call at 9 a.m. So can I take that conference call from wherever I'm at on the trail
Yes.
at 9 a.m. and not worry about any of these things you've talked about? Internet connection, battery life. Do I have the tools at my disposal? That's this confluence of technology, right?
Yes.
That's all coming together. And I think we have plenty of it. I don't think we're done innovating. The Vision Pro is a good example of that, but I don't think we're done with this. But there is plenty of that technology that you can almost work using whatever tools you want. You can almost do most any job, I want to say, that
Right.
requires technology.
Yeah. Yeah. So the devices, of course, we you just spoke about, and I put in here, yes, AI too, and that's going to help. I don't want to get too much into that because you know how I feel about it. Um, I think it's just kind of the green or the what do they call it? You know, just those catchphrases now. So it's not really a clear definition for most folks of what AI is, but what's truly AI, it is going to drive a lot of this. Um, being able to access the information you need where and when you need it, and be able to be a digital nomad. But I wanted to jump into this with the last few minutes we have on this on the main show is the Vision Pro. So this was a holdover for last week, right? I mentioned that um, this is almost a perfect device for a digital nomad,
Yeah.
right? And not in its current state. Not the device now that we're seeing news
The
report after news
concept.
report of returns. Right, right.
Yeah.
The concept of, and again, I keep going back to my whole decentralized computing idea, but imagine being able to complete a full workday, however long that is, 6 to 8 hours, and you don't need to have a monitor. You don't need to have a keyboard. You don't need to have all of this stuff. You just throw on your glasses. You put your little phone-like device in your pocket. You have your watch as an interface. You have your digital interface where you're typing on a blank surface or pinching and dragging and moving things like that. So imagine being able to complete a whole workday on something like a Vision Pro. This is a digital nomad's dream. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
again, not this device that we're seeing the return gate, all these returns for. And we'll talk about that more next week. But the concept of this device, this augmented reality device, headset, goggles, whatever you want to call it, that's going to be a
Yeah.
huge tool for digital nomads. I can see that really taking off.
I could argue. I mean, is it ideal right now? No. Is it
Yeah.
too heavy? Probably. Am I still going to
Yes.
need a keyboard and possibly a trackpad? Yes, if I want to do real work. Is it helpful to
Right.
have a Mac? Yes. All of those things still run true. So those are
Yes.
limitations. But if I think about, let's say I was going to spend the whole summer traveling the country in my trailer, but I
Yeah.
needed to work 40 hours a week for clients, and I needed to be on calls and do presentations, and I needed to be able to multitask, and I needed to be able to let my wife drive while I'm working on
Right.
things, right? I mean, imagine sitting, instead of sitting in the front of my truck with this 14-inch laptop screen, which is amazing, by the way. and trying to work on 2 spreadsheets and a presentation all at the same time, just put on my glasses, right?
Right.
And zone out, tune out everything and go to work. That's amazing. So the concept, I think, is there too. I do think it's a digital nomad's dream. Has some work to go, and it can't be
Right.
$3,500 because one of the
Exactly.
other things, and I know we're running out of time here, but one of the other things that was pointed out in the article is that odds are these digital nomads are not getting rich, right?
No,
And
they're
so they're not I'm now I'm on path to a CEO with CEO money, right?
right.
With more money than grass kind of thing, or
Yeah.
sand if you're in the desert. They're probably not. The comment was made that most of these digital nomads are probably just getting by.
Right. They're
And
working just like us.
they are. And the flip side of that was, but so is everybody else, right? And so
Right.
$3,500 and you still need Mac, iPad, iPhone,
Right.
whatever
Battery,
else.
extra battery, carrying
Yeah, yeah.
case. Yep.
All of that
Yep.
kind of stuff. So that's still super, super difficult. But the concept is there. And I think longer term we're gonna get to where that facilitates more of this digital nomad lifestyle.
So, all right. So let's continue our whole tech talk because this is a tech show. I know we got a little bit off track, but I enjoyed that conversation. But let's get into the real reason why people are here, and that's the iPad, my
Are
favorite
we
device
the
of all time.
are we the let's see, what could we call ourselves? So we know we're tech grandpas. Are we the iPad grandpas?
We are. I'm definitely an iPad grandpa. And not to go off topic here, but remember that whole conversation about, buying my grandkids iPads and mostly just to stay in touch with them. I think the little one, I think she's about ready for a mini. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I think we're
I
moving in that direction.
My iPad broke. What are your grandkids going to do? Who are they going to go to if their iPad breaks?
Right. Right. They're going to
Right
come
to
to their,
grandpa.
so
Grandpa, I know you've
we're
got one in your
iPad
closet.
grandpas. Right. So
But it's
we're going to
also
do the,
tying
oh, go
this
ahead.
in, right? It's also, if you think about digital nomads, it's
Yes. Yes.
also
This
a
is,
really good device for a digital nomad.
it is, especially the iPad Pro, the 12.9 inch with the keyboard. It is a laptop replacement for some jobs. I
Yeah.
know, you look at YouTube and there's conversation after conversation and show after show and video after video about this argument. Is it a true laptop replacement? No, not yet. Is it just not for your job, right? You're doing video editing and things like that. We talked at length about the limitations that I had with trying to record the show with my iPad. But for your job, if all you're doing is updating a couple of spreadsheets and a couple of Zoom meetings, and it is a laptop replacement for some
Uh,
jobs.
how many IT professionals, though, too, haul a tablet around and just
Right,
remote in to
right, right.
wherever they need to go? I mean,
Most of
think
them.
about, think about your, we know that I did it at Stewart. Think about what you did at Stewart. Think about what
Hmm.
you did at Halliburton with
Right,
today's iPad Pro and a remote connection into the network. Is there anything you
right,
couldn't do on your
right.
iPad?
That was. I could have done 98% of my job on this iPad Pro, this M2 iPad Pro that I have now. So,
Other
and
than
I'm pretty
unplugging
sure.
and replugging stuff in, right? That would be the 2%.
Right. Yep, that's the main thing. Lugging around that big charger was the main thing. So we're right here on the edge. We're right on the
So
precipices
close.
of a release of new iPad Pros. So, and the rumors, they change weekly. So I read an article a couple of days back, and just to do just a quick rumor roundup, um, the price, like we mentioned, was overly exaggerated, which was a huge
We
relief.
hope.
So
Please
yeah.
don't disappoint us on that one.
Now there is a lot of new technology going into this thing, right? And you and I, as tech guys, we're spec geeks. We know that this new technology costs more than the technology that we've been getting in these devices. So we're prepared for a slight price increase, a couple of $100. I'm ready for. But yeah, the price tag that they had at the entry level model was putting me already over.
40%. Yeah.
Right, right. It was putting me well out of my price range. So um I'm excited about that. the next is the new camera position, right? And this was a rumor that had been coming for the last couple of generations of iPad Pros, right? Was moving the camera from the top of the iPad in portrait mode to landscape mode. So put it in the basically on the side of the screen when you hold it horizontally, it'll be at the top. That new camera position is how 90% of the people, maybe it's not 90%, but it's high, maybe in the high 60s or 70% of the people use their iPad on a keyboard in landscape mode. Right.
Especially the big 12.9er.
Right, right. So moving that camera position will help with, because I'm always covering, when I'm holding it, I'm always covering the camera. So Face ID, things like that, um, video calls, FaceTime calls and stuff, that'll help with that. MagSafe charging was one of the rumors that I saw early on that kind of disappeared, but now it's back again. So being able to charge with the MagSafe thing, it'll um, kind of add a, how do I want to say this? Uh, uh, a quality of life improvement for the iPad, right? It's just
Yeah.
not that how lazy have we become as humans. I was just such a hassle plugging something into my device, but having a MagSafe charger is just, I would use it on most of the models of iPad Air that I had, and it's been great, right?
Yeah.
Just being able to, now on my wife's MacBook Pro, having to plug that USB-C charger in is just like, why is Apple going back and forth with MagSafe? It's just weird. But MagSafe charger on the iPad Air and now having it on the iPad would be really good. I would have to buy a bunch of new chargers, of course, but that'll
You mean
really
on the
be a
MacBook
huge
Air, right? It's
on the
not on the
MacBook
current
Air.
iPad Air. Yeah,
No, not on
this
the
is
iPad Air.
yeah, the
I'm sorry,
MacBook
I
Air.
confused those. On my MacBook Air, I'm
Yeah.
looking down here at the floor because my MacBook Air is sitting down and it has the MagSafe charger on it. But including that on the iPad Pro would be
Yeah.
a huge plus for me,
Yeah, I mean this one, so I'd mentioned a couple of shows ago that I'm seriously considering the iPad Air instead of
right?
the Pro.
Right.
Of all the rumors about the Pro, this is the one that's going to make me go, "Oh, do I really want the Air?" If the Pro gets MagSafe
Right.
and the Air does not.
Right, right. It's one
So,
of those things. And like I said, depending on the specs, we'll know when they stand on the stage and do that keynote. Because some of the rumors are they're just that. They're
yeah.
just rumors. We never know until Tim Cook
Well,
comes out and says,
and this
"Team,
one's
show them what you got."
complicated. This is complicated because it means the back, at least part of the back of the iPad would have to be
Mhm.
glass because it couldn't be aluminum,
Right.
right? So the question is, if the whole thing is glass, it's less durable, heavier, right?
More
Or
fragile.
do they
Right.
turn the Apple logo into glass so that MagSafe can charge through just that section, right? I mean, that was the video that you dropped in here, the Zone of Tech video that we'll link to in the
Right.
show notes. That was one of the things it talked about because I don't think the iPad is that heavy, but I think if you put 13 vertical or 13 diagonal inches of glass on the back of that thing, I think you put that in a keyboard case, that kind of stuff, it starts to get really, really heavy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. And it again, more fragile, right? When
Yeah.
you add glass onto something that, and I've only dropped this iPad maybe once or twice in the year I've had it, and it wasn't huge drops, right? It was I leaned it against something and it flopped over, or it took a tumble from the bed to my little rug by the bed or something like that. So no huge drops, but yeah, adding glass to that thing, even Gorilla Glass, it still gives it a vulnerable point to where
Yeah.
we're just going to see a bunch of people going around with a cracked Apple logo on the back of their
Oh
iPad
man, I
Pro.
can't
So,
handle my wife's screen protector on her iPhone mini. How in the world would I handle cracked glass on the back of a 13-inch
right.
iPad?
Really. So, yeah, but like Greg said, Zone of Tech is the article. We'll link it in the show notes. Check it out if you wanted to get up on the latest iPad rumors. So that was the show for this week, folks. That was all I had. It was fun talking about digital nomadism and things like that. But before we go, I wanted to share a weird coincidence that happened when I was outlining the show. So when I'm outlining, I'm usually playing something in the background, right, as I'm prepping. And most of the time it's YouTube or Netflix or something like that. This time it happened to be YouTube, and a YouTuber came on who lives in his little truck. He builds a camper on the back of his truck. He has all his little vehicles and stuff that he's towing, and he's riding around the Arctic, right? And he makes these videos. But during the video, he was sitting on his little mini sofa in the back, eating his gumbo that he had prepared. And he was looking at a celebration of life picture of his friend that he had lost a few years before, that that died doing something that he loved. It wasn't a tragic death like cancer or anything like that. He died um, doing one of his hobbies or whatever. And it's funny because I have in my head my whole view on digital nomadism and things like that, and I'm outlining the show. But he really just started talking about time, right? And without getting too philosophical about this thing, time is really one of the most important things that we have in our lives, right? So I thought, well, maybe I'm looking at it from the wrong perspective, right? And this is as I'm outlining the show, and he started talking about time and how you know most people, they spend most of their lives working to buy the things that they want in life or to live the lifestyle that they want, right? Maybe I should look at it from a point of view of you're living the lifestyle that you want and the life that you want, and you're taking a little time from that lifestyle to work and to buy the things. You know what I mean? They almost have it in reverse
Yeah.
about the way that we've been viewing things. So you know, instead of me, and I'm not judgmental about it at all. We'll get into that here in the post show about my rant. I'll sound a little judgmental, but maybe they have the right idea. Instead of working our lives away to be able to go on cruises and go on the vacations or to be at the campsite and things that we want to live, why don't we live that way and use this technology and stuff available to us to be able to work that 6 to 8 hours a day to be able to achieve those to maintain or support the lifestyle instead of doing it in reverse, right? You work 360 something days a year to vacation 5 days, you know.
I think both sides have it wrong, personally. I
Okay.
think the people that say, well, I'm going to work for a couple of months, and then I'm going to take 6 months off, and then I'm going to go work for a couple of months and
Yeah,
take
there's
six
some of
months and
that.
six
Yeah.
months off. Um, and even more extreme than that, I only want to work 2 hours a week and then I just want to do whatever. I don't think that's good. I heard the other day that something around idleness is a disease that can quickly become uncurable, something
Right.
like that, right? So I think that's wrong. But I
Wow,
also
that is a
think,
really good quote. I like
yeah,
that.
I'll have to pull the actual one and send it to you. But I also think the other side of this, and I'm not faulting them because this is how it was, but if I think about older generations, that I just have to work. My
Yeah.
my goal in life is to work. And I go to work and I come home and I go to work and I come home and if I have time for the family, but that was a lot of the pressure that was put on, especially husbands and fathers and men in general, right? There was all of this pressure that that's what their
Yeah,
goal in
that's what
life
we're
should
here
have
to
been.
do. Right.
Yep. And so work at the expense of life or life at the expense of work. And I think
Exactly.
what we should be looking at, which is what I think the concept of a lifestyle career is a blend of the two. Is can I choose a career that allows me to live the kind of life that I want to live and still work, which we need as human
Hmm.
beings. We need to work, but also we have to make money. It's just no real way around that. Even some of these shows, because I watch them of people that go completely off grid and homestead and all that
Yes.
kind of stuff, they still end up having to pay taxes and do some of these other kinds of things. So that's the way we're built. So I do think it needs to be a blend of these. And so I don't think you're looking at it wrong. I just think we need to shift. And what I hope for personally for me, which is why I hope my kids listen to this, is that I hope I'm not too late in
Yeah.
making this transition, right? And trying to move into this more lifestyle career that I want to do next. versus that dream of, yeah, I want to be CEO and have so much money that I can retire and spend time with my money. Don't.
Yeah.
That's not what I want anymore. So.
Right. Right. Well, that was all I had. I wanted to share that little part. Greg, what do you have for us for next week?
Well, next week, maybe it'll be a little more of a traditional episode. I really enjoyed this conversation today, maybe too
Right.
much, but
It was a lot of fun.
yeah. Next week, I have two topics. I want to talk follow up on continuity. Remember, we talked about that was the secret sauce with the Apple Vision Pro. And if I think
Hmm.
about Nomad life, right? Continuity, having all of your stuff work, play nice together is super important. So we're going to dive into that a little more detail. And it's finally time. I paid the subscription to talk about my journaling stuff. Remember, said I
Okay.
was going on this journey for
Right.
journaling. And so we're going to talk about day one in journaling and how that's making a difference and actually is making a much bigger difference um,
Okay.
than I thought it would. So the preview is that it's not just about the tool, but the tool is getting me to do more, which is making a big difference in my life. So those are the two topics I have. We'll do one in the main show, probably one in the post show, some combination of the two. I don't know, but that's what we'll be talking
Right.
about.
All right, guys. So sorry for the long one this week. Like I said, it was a really good conversation. But um, Greg, you want to give us a good closing?
I don't got one today. Think about this. Spend some
Yeah.
time thinking about where you're at right now, especially if you're just coming out of college or whatever the case may be. My
Yeah.
best advice to you, and
Yeah.
my best closing is to you, between this and next week's episode, give this some thought and don't be afraid to dream and don't be afraid to change your dreams. So
Yeah. I like it. We'll see you next week, guys.
thanks everyone.